So welcome everybody that's joined us, and thank you very much. This is going to be an hour-long session. Very pleased that we've got lovely Leigh, who's going to be presenting for us. Like we said before, please do use the chat box. If you've got any questions, let us know. We'll be circulating the slides and the recording after the session. So thank you very much, and over to you, Leigh.
Thank you. Good morning, everybody. Hello, my name is Leigh Kendall. I am the Programme Lead for Social Influence with Horizons, and we're looking forward to a really interactive and hopefully fun session this morning about social influence. And I just wanted to take the time to introduce my colleagues. So we have Lindsay, who is our host today, Paul, who is helping us with our technical bits and bobs, and Zara, who is helping us with the chat room. So good morning, everybody. Paul, can we have the next slide, please? So the session, as I say, will be informal, interactive, and hopefully you'll find it fun. So we'll be talking about the role Twitter has with healthcare improvement. We'll be talking about super connectors, spread and reach, and how to measure your Twitter activity. So please join in the chat box with reflections, comments and questions, and we'll pause a few times during the session to take feedback and questions. And if you're on Twitter, please do tweet. The hashtag is Project A and my handle is Leigh A. Kendall. Next slide, please, Paul. So what is social media? So there are loads of different platforms. There's Facebook, there's Instagram, there's Snapchat, Pinterest, LinkedIn and Twitter, to name just a few. So in essence, social media is websites and applications that enables users to create and share content and to social network. And it also enables the creation and sharing of information, and increases spread and reach globally. And what's most important to, or one of the things of most interest to us, is that social media helps transcend traditional hierarchies. It's not just about news media holding all of the information. It democratizes our sharing of information so anybody can have a voice. Anyone can seek to build influence, build networks, and have an impact on issues that are important to you. Next slide, please, Paul. And social media represents a global shift in how the health and care system, people, patients, professionals and students can connect. Because social media, it transcends not only the traditional hierarchies, but also global blockages and hurdles, because you can connect with anybody from all over the world, different organisations and different specialties. You can learn and share together. Next slide, please, Paul. And the healthcare industry is changing with incredible speed. And one of the major contributors to this change is a dramatic upsurge in healthcare communication brought on by social media. There is so much incredible interactivity and networking and connection on social media between healthcare professionals. You can see tweet chats, you can see communities of practice, and there's so much learning and sharing. It's really quite incredible on social media. Next slide, please, Paul. And whilst multiple social media channels, as we've seen before, there's LinkedIn, there's Facebook, and other platforms as well, Twitter is the #1 channel for sharing and influencing. There's a few reasons for that. The main one is that Twitter is open. So with Facebook, for example, you need to be friends with other people. With LinkedIn, you need to have the connections with other people, whereas Twitter is open and you can tag anybody you like into a tweet with hashtags and things. You can spread and reach all over the world. So for this session, we'll be focusing on Twitter. Next slide, please, Paul. And here we have a little bit of audience participation. So what I'd like you to do is just very simply say, do you have a Twitter account? And in a moment, Paul will turn on the annotation. And at the top of your screen, you should see view options, which is at the very top. So if you click on that and click on annotate, and that will open the annotation tool and choose stamp. Oh, some of you are already starting to do that, so brilliant. And choose whichever stamp you like, whether it's a heart or an arrow or a cross or whatever. Super. Has everybody had a chance to put their stamp? Excellent. Thank you. Paul, would you mind turning off the annotation and clearing it, please? And we'll move on to the next slide. So everybody has a Twitter account, so I'll go through this very quickly, so I'm not teaching you to suck eggs, but this is a quick tour of Twitter. So on the left, you can see my profile, so you can see what my username is. So this is on here just in case we had anyone without a Twitter account, so teaching people some of the terminology from Twitter. So the username is also known as the handle. And it's always worth putting, adding a bio on your Twitter account to let people know who you are, not just your job title, but who you are as a person, what you're interested in, what people can expect to find on your Twitter feed. Adding a picture, and it's also worth adding the long picture at the top as well, showing something that you're interested in, something that shows your values. And just to give a quick anatomy of a tweet, so you'll see hashtags. They're useful for collating and finding tweets on the same topic. So I'd always use them sparingly. So on words that will help people find things of the same interest. So for example, I wouldn't put the hashtag on something like health because there'll be so many tweets mentioning the word health. It's very difficult to find and for people to find you. Whereas if you use something very specific relating to even for a television program, for example, or a conference that you're at will have a hashtag, or a project, a program of work. So for example, Project A has its own hashtag. And tag people in, because successful social media is all about having relationships and connecting with people. And adding a picture gets more attention. People tend to follow lots of people on Twitter, so it helps you get attention in the busy feed. And tagging people in that picture saves characters for what you want to say, because each tweet has a 240 character maximum. So tagging people in the photo rather than the tweet just leaves you more space for something to explain more about why you're sending that tweet. Next slide, please, Paul. So here we have a sketch note that I drew. Thank you to all of the people on Twitter who contributed to this. It's a crowdsourced sketch note, 10 tips for social media success. I'll go into more detail about all of the points in this sketch note, but in brief, social media success is about being authentic, genuine, human and kind. So it's very tempting on social media to try and show a persona that's false, because we're behind a keyboard. It's easy to put filters on our pictures and show an idealized life and things, but genuine and authenticity takes you much further than trying to be pretend. And just as in real life, people who talk about themselves and never ask anybody any questions about themselves gets pretty boring on social media. So don't just broadcast, be curious and ask questions. Be clear about your purpose. What do you want to be known for? Be credible. We'll talk about this in more detail later on. And make it a habit. Set aside a small amount of time to engage every day. Because building relationship takes time. Anything that's worth doing is worth investing time every day. And respect confidentiality and other professional boundaries, which is really, really important, of course. And as we'll be talking about in further detail later on in the session, using your social networks helps make action happen, and finding your super connectors, we'll be talking about in a little while. And on social media, sometimes things can get a bit heated, get a bit passionate, but never ever say on social media what you wouldn't say to someone's face, and never tweet while angry. Would you mind passing on to the next slide, please, Paul? So just to go over that again, some Twitter turn-ons and Twitter turn-offs. So being kind, polite, relevant, authentic, share relevant content, saying thanks. And Twitter turn-offs, not just talking about yourself. Don't be rude. Don't just broadcast don't send the auto DMs. You might see when you follow someone, you get straight away a DM saying, thanks for following me, and it's usually sales related. It's quite artificial. It saves that person time, but it's inauthentic. So don't recommend you don't do that. And also cliques. Sometimes you might see someone being cross that you're barging into their conversation, but you know, I always say, if you want to have a private conversation, Twitter is perhaps not the best place to have it. So if it's something that you don't want other people to join in with, choose another platform. Next slide, please, Paul. So this is really, really important, of course. You know, we're talking about the ambulance service, other health and care services as well. So your professional regulatory body, your organisation will have their own guidelines for what to do and what not to do on social media. So always follow the professional guidelines for tweeting. Lots of colleagues in the ambulance service use Twitter really, really successfully to build networks and to share learning. And some frontline paramedics live tweet their shifts and their work, which is fantastic because it raises awareness of the variety of the work that they do and how hard they work. Sometimes they get into a bit of a pickle if there's it's considered a breach of patient confidentiality. So it's just being careful, of course. And my rule of thumb is if you're ever in doubt, don't tweet something. But of course, in big letters, consult your organisational and professional guidelines. But I don't want this to scare anybody because the advantages of using social media, as long as you're careful and follow the guidelines, far outweigh any risks. Next slide, please, Paul. So another audience participation opportunity. So if we could turn on the annotation again, please, Paul. So what's your Twitter confidence level? So if you're a whiz, or if you've got an account but not really sure what you're doing, or you don't have an account, and you can be anywhere in between those things. We've got a whiz, which is brilliant. Zara, absolutely, of course, I've taught you well. Fantastic. And most people are in between, they're a whiz and got an account but not really sure what they're doing. So your confidence level is, yeah, you're there, but there's a few more things to learn. Does that sound about right? Nods. Fantastic. Okay, so if everybody's had a chance to have their say, put their stamp on the slide, we shall ask Paul nicely to turn that off and clear the slide and move on. So in the next slide, we're going to be talking about why it's worth improving your confidence level and some skills that you can learn to become a whiz and why that's a value for you and healthcare in general. So people who are highly connected have twice as much power to influence change as those with hierarchical power. And I find that fascinating because traditionally it's the bosses, it's the people, the chief executives, the board members who have the power. But these days, with the democratization of social media, people, anybody of any band, of any role, have the opportunity to influence change. And there are so many brilliant opportunities with social media to do that. Next slide, please, Paul. And employees have 10 times more connections than corporate social media accounts. I find this really fascinating as well because a corporate account might seem to have lots of power, which in a way it does, but corporate accounts on the whole tend to be quite broadcasty, saying this is a press release from our organisation or this is what we think about X, Y and Z, whereas employees' networks on the whole tend to be more interacting and relational, having conversations. So we have much more influence and power than we might give ourselves credit for. Next slide, please, Paul. So this is a slide you might have seen if you've seen a presentation by Helen Bevan or done the School for Change Agents. So this is research by a Danish organisation called Innovisor. And they say in an average organisation, just 3% of people in any organisational system typically influence 85% of the other people. And that's pretty staggering, isn't it? You think that, it's just a few people influencing the majority of others. And can we have the next slide, please, Paul? We've discovered that's true on Twitter as well as in organisations. So tweets by just 3.3% of tweeters accounted for 85% of retweets. So Helen Bevan, our Chief Transformation Officer in Horizons, is a super connector. Can you next slide, please, Paul? And we'll also have our ambulance service super connector. I'm not sure if Dave is on the session today. No, don't think so.
No, he couldn't make it, but he's already asked for the recording. So yeah, he sends his apologies. But yeah, he'll love this.
Okay, I'll say hi, Dave. So Dave is a super connector. So he's one of the 3%. And one of the things that I think is fascinating about this is that you don't need an amazing amount of followers to be a super connector. I'm sure Dave won't mind me saying this, but he has a very modest amount of followers, so 741 followers. So it's not about having thousands and millions of followers in order to have influence, because we've got a few quotes here about Dave. So Dave knows everyone in the ambulance service, not just the North East. He's really influential on Twitter, and loads of ambulance staff use Twitter for work topics. Dave wants to help you sort out issues. He's respected by senior people and by the front line. And what I think is really great about Dave is that he takes a lot of effort to engage with people. He goes to a lot of effort to join things like tweet chats, sharing his knowledge and also asking lots of questions and building those connections between people. So anybody can become a super connector. It's not about hierarchy. It's not about lots of followers. It's about what you do as a person, as a member of the Twitter community, to help build networks, bridge networks, learn and share. So thanks, Dave. Next slide, please, Paul. So as we were talking about with super connectors, one of the things that Dave does so well is a curator and sharer of knowledge, and he builds bridges between disconnected groups. So this is the biggest opportunity for healthcare improvements in social media. This is how we can become super connectors. This is how we can use Twitter as a huge tool for healthcare improvement and spreading knowledge. Next slide, please, Paul. So have people heard of the term echo chamber in relation to social media? So that means in our current world, it's really easy to curate just media and news and information that agrees with what we think. So a good example of that is, for example, people who don't believe in vaccination, so anti-vaxxers. So they operate in an echo chamber. They follow other people who agree with them and read news, or follow evidence that agrees with what they think about vaccinations. And when you live in an echo chamber like that, you think everybody agrees with you. So you're following people with similar views, and you think, and that just reinforces your bias that you are correct, because the evidence that you have from your Twitter feed, from your news, is that your view is correct because that's what you're receiving. And it could happen with not just anti-vax, of course, but with politics, all sorts of things. So it's one thing to be careful of about, it's very tempting to just, it's a very human thing to just center yourself with people who agree with you and have the same opinions, but it creates an echo chamber which can be dangerous for many reasons. Next slide, please, Paul. So how to break out the echo chamber is creating a spectrum of allies. So as I said just now, it's really tempting and really human to center yourself with people who think like you and agree with you and pat you on the back and say you're doing a great job. But in order to create change, again, this is something you will have seen if you've done the School for Change Agents, is you need a spectrum of allies. So you need people who disagree with you. So you need active opposition, and not necessarily from a negative challenge point of view, but also people who can say, is that really a good idea, and give you a chance to reflect and perhaps change tack. And it's something that I try and do on social media. I try and have a wide view of people. I don't necessarily agree with them, but it's interesting to see what they're saying. It helps me challenge my views, my biases, and what I'm thinking as well. So it's really good to have conversations and be challenged positively sometimes. So yeah, it's really worth following people who have diverse views and engaging in conversation as well. Next slide, please, Paul. So this is a node Excel graph. I don't expect you to be able to make any sense of all of these lines. It looks really confusing. But this is something called node Excel. It is very kindly done by a GP trainee from Scotland called Graham Mackenzie. It's so node Excel shows the connections between different groups of people. So these gatherings of people would be an echo chamber in normal, in inverted commas, normal conversations. So people who collate around one another, talk to one another. And the green lines show the connections between these groups that happen during this tweet chat. So a beautiful thing about tweet chats is you see people making connections with one another and sharing knowledge with people that they've never heard of before, or for example, they might not even realise they needed to know before. So this shows the power of social media that can link and bridge networks and connect people with one another. Next slide, please, Paul.
Leigh, we've got a question in the chat box. Can I interrupt quickly? It's from Jane.
If you have questions in just a moment. If that's right.
Okay.
But we can take it now as well. Yeah, no, it's fine. We can take it now.
Jane saying, how do you know if you're a super connector if you can't judge this by the number of followers? How do you judge it?
That's a really good question. So a super connector will be someone who is asked lots of questions. So you might see if there's a question on Twitter, so-and-so will know, or if a common tactic on Twitter is when you're trying to get spread for something, you're tagging people who you know have influence. So you'll see Helen being tagged in lots of things with the hope that she'll share it or make comment on it. I, for example, get asked questions about various things. As well as my regular job, I'm also a patient leader in maternity, and I get asked lots of questions about that. So, because people know that I know lots of people within the maternity world. So does that help answer the question about super connectors?
We haven't got a response in the chat box yet, but I'll keep you updated.
No worries. Thank you. It's there's no hard and fast one rule. Yes, kind of. If there's anything else you want to know, please just pop it in the chat box. There's no one hard and fast answer, but I think as a rule of thumb, it is about those people who are the go-to people. But no problem. You're very welcome. Thank you for answering the question. The go-to people, the people who, those people who know everybody, seem to know the answers to everything. So, and you can become a super connector by, putting yourself out there, learning and sharing, and building the networks between people. So this is a slide that you probably would have seen if you've done School for Change Agents. So it's talking about how we can use our stories on social media to make change happen. Because we start off with ourselves, what's important to us, and we can use social media to call to other people, people who are interested in making the same change happen. So with Project Day, for example, we have a few disparate people making change happen in their relevant ambulance trusts, and with Project Day we help connect people together through our tweet chats, through our collaboratives that we had earlier in the year, bringing people together to share their knowledge and learning, and then they work together to make things happen. Say, for example, with the mental health, with the basic steps, that Darren and Gillian that have done a fantastic job with that, with Falls, all of those things. So social media can be a brilliant complement to bringing people together who might not otherwise have heard of one another, or sometimes it answers questions you didn't even know you had. It raises awareness to fantastic opportunities and horizons, pardon the pun. If you wouldn't mind moving on to the next slide, please, Paul. So here we go for questions. If we do have any more questions, that would be lovely.
So I've got, I guess I'm after a little bit of advice really. So going back to the start when you were talking about bios and some key information. So I know that you explained like to give like a glimpse into like who you are and what you're interested in, and not just work. What is there anything else that you could add to that? What is there anything that'd make you really stand out?
I think more than standing out, I think it's about being genuine and authentic. And I think it's more about tactics to stand out in your tweets, because your bio is something that people will notice once they will go to once they've seen a tweet or want to follow you, and the bio will give the person more information about why they should follow you. So it's a difficult question to answer in terms of standing out as such. I think more importantly is about being genuine, being authentic. And say something funny, for example, might be a good way to stand out. I know, for example, you've got a dog called Sasha Fierce. Make a joke about that, for example.
I do. On my bio, it does say dash hund mummy, but I just thought, yeah. I was thinking about changing it, but taking your advice, I think I have been authentic and genuine with what I've put. So
yes, absolutely, and that's the most important thing. It really is. Yeah, try not to overthink it.
I think I'll stick with that. But no, that's great. Thank you for the advice.
No worries, because I think sometimes when people try too hard to be a bit clever or funny, it can come over as a bit conceited or a bit smug and things. So yeah, I think you're best to be authentic. Any more questions?
There is.
Zara struggling with her microphone.
It's like stuck on my head. We've got another one in the chat box, and that's: is it advisable to change your handle if you're not too keen on the one you have inherited?
Oh, that's a really good question. Yes, absolutely. Something that Twitter has started doing in the last couple of years is because there's lots of bots. Bots, if you don't know, are computer programs. They're not real humans, and they can be set up to set up Twitter accounts. And so what Twitter does is it gives an auto handle. So it will be the person's name and 8 digits, with the principle that a real human will go to the effort of changing it, whereas a bot won't. So to answer your question, yes, absolutely, it's worth changing your handle to something relevant to you. So what is your handle at the moment, person who asked? Yeah, is that your individual personal Twitter account, Jane? Yeah, it's not really snappy, and that could be quite the trust one. Okay, so do you have your own personal one, Jane? No, that's right, and I think it's quite difficult to spell as well, isn't it? I bet you would spend quite a lot of time saying, this is how you spell it, and it would get misspelled. So yeah, I would definitely, let me just see what it says again. Yeah, service imp, yeah, it doesn't really say what you do. And service imp is, yeah, absolutely change it, yes. I know plenty of people who've changed their Twitter handle. Bev, who is our colleague in Horizons team, has changed hers a couple of times. She has now changed it to Bev Matthews RN to show that she's a nurse, for example. So yeah, people will still be able to find you. So you could always send out a tweet to say that you've changed your handle to whatever you've changed it to. And people will also, if they type in the name of your trust rather than the handle, Twitter can be really clever in auto entering what it is that you the person is mean. Yeah. Any downsides of changing your handle? It can be a little bit challenging for people to find you, but nothing negative as long as it's an appropriate thing to change it to. That's the only thing I can think of that would be a negative. But I think there's definitely more positives than negatives, because I can imagine people will get a bit in a pickle with the KCHFT thing. So if you change it to something that's a bit simpler to use. You can use underscores as well if that helps, but just have a brainstorm with your colleagues and see what you might want to change it to. And yeah, I think it might take a little bit of time for people to get used to it, but perhaps do a tweet with a graphic saying what your new handle is and pin it to your profile page, then people will get used to it very, very quickly. So and I think you probably find you get more engagement. You're very welcome. Thank you for asking the question. Do you know how to change it? It's in your settings. It's really easy to do once you know what you want to change it to. No? Cool. Ah, excellent. Awesome. Yeah, so what I'd say is just have a chat with your colleagues, decide what you want to change it to. Yeah, do a graphic with your new handle on, pin it, tweet it, and then pin it to your profile, and I'm sure people will get used to it in no time. And if it's easier to type, I'm sure you get lots of engagement. So good luck. I look forward to hearing how you're getting on. Follow me and then I'll have a look. Next slide, please, Paul, if there's no more questions. Cool. Thank you. So spread and reach. So when you hear people talk about social media, often you'll hear, let's make it go viral, or, such and such a thing went viral. And that can be the holy grail, but not really. Because when you're thinking about something going viral, do people forget about it the next day? They might have a laugh at it, or they might go, oh, at it. But, does it have any more longevity than just that moment of admiring it or commenting to your friend? Does it have any impact? So rather than focusing on going viral, focus on sharing good content that your communities will be interested in, content that's authentic to you, not just because you think something might be fashionable or jumping on a bandwagon or something like that. Find your people, find a community, social movements, join hashtags that you're interested in, and share calls to action as well. Of course, in health and care and the ambulance service, there'll be things that you need people to do or not do. When we're thinking about, winter, for example, what might you want people to do more than ever? Think about calling 999 appropriately, because of course services will be even more stretched than usual during winter. Things like that, things that people can take action and share with their friends and families. Because as the quote from Jonah Burgess says, when we care, we share. And of course people are going to be caring about ambulance services and health and care in general. So think about things that people will be interested in and want to take action with. Next slide, please, Paul. So what kind of content has the best reach and spread? So stories with high emotion, and there'll be lots of those with health and care and ambulance services. Of course, there is a caveat with that around patient confidentiality, so please be careful. The wow factor, so there might be a good thing to use in the ambulance service. The wow factor might be the number of call-outs that the service had, or the number of inappropriate call-outs as a way of raising awareness of when to call the ambulance service and when not to call the ambulance service. Social currency, which is a different way of saying this is something that's in the news and this is my thoughts on it. It's very tempting, I think, when you see something in the news just to click, just share the link and tweet it. But where you can really add value as a way of becoming a super connector and bridging networks is to add your own thoughts to it. You don't even have to agree with something in the news, but just adding your thoughts to it, adding value. And it's worth looking at this quote again by Jonah Berger. So people don't think in terms of information. So if you think about bar charts and things, you think in terms of narratives. And of course, the health service is about human beings. So it's about stories, it's about people. So while people focus on the story itself, the information comes along with the ride. So think about when you're sharing something, the narrative that goes along with it, something that makes people want to read, compels people into sharing it with their own followers. And also the R factor is another way of increasing your social influence and bridging networks. I don't know if anybody follows our colleague's cat, Rolf at Warwick, but he has an amazing amount of followers. And as I'll go into in a minute, the average engagement rate is something between 1% and 2%. Rolf has about 18% engagement, which is incredible. So, as a fun aside, in order to, and he's an amazing super connector, tweet about a cat. But for most of us, it's only something we can dream of. But it just goes to show the R factor is hugely, hugely relevant and very powerful. Next slide, please, Paul. So as we were talking about just now, most social media is fleeting, especially when you think about viral content. It might have a laugh or go wow at it, but it goes. So millions of people might have seen your content, but has it had an impact? And that's what we need to focus on when we're talking about social media for healthcare improvement and our return on social media influence. So thinking about impact, is it nobody cares? You just might have seen it on your Twitter feed and gone, yeah, whatever. Or is it actually having an impact? And how do you know? I wonder if anyone's got any thoughts on that. We can put it in the chat box and we can just move on. Next slide, please, Paul. We can talk about that in a moment. Thank you. So to maximise your reach, spread, influence and impact, so be authentic, be generous. So as we were talking about earlier, super connectors are people who give advice, share interesting content, and are the go-to people by giving advice and sharing interesting content. And Twitter can have its limitations in that it's got 240 characters. So use complementary platforms like blogs or Stella to give your voice and longevity, and it can also help you become a thought leader in your area of specialism as well. It can give your messages longevity as well, because of course with Twitter, unless you pin a tweet, things disappear down the timeline really quickly. So a blog or a vlog or a Stella story is something that people can find potentially a lot more easily than a tweet that's disappeared millions of tweets down the timeline. Next slide, please, Paul. So again, this is one you might have seen during the School for Change Agents. So looking at stories to maximise your return on social media influence. So thinking about stories, how we feel, inspiring others with our stories of what we're doing at work, what we're achieving, sharing, what we do and the why we do it. In health and care, in the ambulance service, the why we're doing things. We want to make things better for our patients. We want to make things better for our colleagues. Along the what we do as well, so with evidence to back it up. But there's some points to remember when sharing things on social media. It's about compelling vision, thinking about what we'll hope for, what can inspire other people to join us in our journeys, to join together to make things better for health and social care for our patients and our colleagues too. Next slide, please, Paul. So 3 principles for spreading change. So when we're thinking of starting a social movement on Twitter, it's making sure that it's actionable, ACE, so it's actionable, connected and extensible. So an idea that makes people want to do something. So it's a call to action, so compelling people together. A few slides ago, you'll have seen the individual calling to others, and then the fierce urgency of now. So it's something connected. It's a closer connection with people you care about or share values with. And within the ambulance community and the wider health and care community, of course, we're all committed to making things better for patients and also our colleagues. So we've got already we have a shared value, a shared vision, and it's making it specific. You know, what do we want people to do? What action will we want people to take? Why should people care? And what can we do to compel people to feel the emotion, the connection with it, and want to get engaged with it? Be really specific. Whether it's what you're wanting someone to join in a tweet chat or share an idea or join a WebEx or a Zoom, something like this, and asking questions. It's making you feel like a community. Because it's transcending the hierarchies. It's taking away from the old sense of a board member, saying this is our new directive and want you to go and do this. It's much more democratic. So anybody from any level can say, let's make this happen. Let's make a change here. And extensible. So the idea can be easily customized, remixed and reshaped by people taking part. So the beauty of social media as well is that, and we can see with Project Day as well, it's different people in different parts of the country are taking it on in ways that are relevant to them. And that's the beauty of social media, that people can have one idea and run with it and take it in a way that's relevant to them. It doesn't need to be homogenous. It doesn't need to be one size fits all. We can learn and share with one another and adapt it in a way that's relevant to us and our own organisation and our own patients. Next slide, please, Paul. So just to summarise what influence and impact is on social media, it is about engagement. It's about starting conversations. It's not about chasing viral. As we saw from Dave, he's a super connector with just over 700 followers. So it's not about chasing the big numbers. It's about being authentic, about being genuine, about bridging networks, being kind, generous, and building communities. People collaborating, people with a common shared purpose, working together to make things happen. It's about quality, not quantity. Don't worry too much about, I must send X amount of tweets a day, and I must send a tweet at 5 o'clock of the day because, some research says that's the best time to send it. Send a tweet when you feel like you've got something of value to say, something to contribute. Be generous and support. Be inclusive. All voices are welcome. Social media also offers us the opportunity to hear diverse voices, as we heard earlier. It's about the spectrum of our lives, the opportunity to hear voices and opinions we might not otherwise have the opportunity to hear in regular life. And it's about being authentic, not playing the game, which again is jumping on bandwagons, and jumping on a bandwagon in the social media world means you might have seen something that's really popular at the moment, and you think you'll send a tweet about it, even though it's not anything to do with you or anything you've got to add to the conversation. So be authentic, things that are relevant to your values and where you want to go to. Next slide, please, Paul. So again, we've got an opportunity to reflect on what we've heard just then and ask any questions that people might have. Oh, I've stunned you into silence. Cool. Okay, so if there's no more, no more questions. Oh, sorry, Lindsay, did you want to ask something?
Yeah, just very quickly. Where did you get this diagram from? I think this one has really struck a chord with me, creating conversations. I just wondered if there's a series or where I could find more of this.
That's a really good question because, as I said earlier, pictures can make a massive impact on social media. And one of my favourite cartoonists is called Gaping Void. And so they have an account on Twitter, and also if you Google Gaping Void and images, there's a wealth of amazing graphics that say so much. I've used a few Gaping Void pictures in my presentation, and if you follow me on Twitter, you'll see me using them quite a few times. There are probably hundreds of them, and they're a good way to start conversation. Actually, this is a good one to say, create conversation, but there are lots of other ones that are things about inspire, beer inspired, about working together and things. And yeah, sometimes if you are perhaps stuck with something to say, or or have something to say but you don't have an image to support it, it's worth searching out Gaping Void, or there's other sketchnoters as well. There's Cheryl Kniesel is a really good one. There's loads and loads on Instagram that can help illustrate what you want to say. The one caveat is always make sure you tag in the tweet the artist and give them a bit of credit. But yeah, that can be a really good way of helping spread your message, and people love sketch notes. So that's a good way of becoming a super connector and increasing your social media influence and impact, because it's a really good way of spreading your message. So it's a fantastic question, Lindsay. Thanks for asking.
Brilliant. No worries. I'll definitely follow them. They're fab. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, they're really, really good, aren't they? And they're so colourful and bright, and yeah, they have a good vibe about them as well, and they got raised some really good points. So yeah, they're really good. Any more questions? Nope. Okay, next slide, please, Paul. Excellent. So for the next few minutes, we're going to be talking about how we measure our influence and impact, because we want to know what impact we have had, and in order to show what is worthwhile doing, we need to be able to measure it. We need to, before we say about numbers don't matter so much, we do in healthcare especially, we need to show evidence for what we've been doing. And a really good site to do that is Simpler. So it's simpler.com. It's free to access, but the caveat to that is you can only access data on a free account relating to the previous 30 days. But I'll show you on the next slide, please, Paul, what information it gives us. So this is project day from the last month, and I'll give you a tour of what all of these numbers mean, starting from the right. So on the right, we have a column called the numbers. Thanks, Sarah. She put the link in the chat box. So the numbers are impressions. So that's 2.7 million impressions for the month. And what impressions means is the number of times a tweet with the hashtag Project Day will have shown up on someone's Twitter feed. And impressions can give us a good idea of how far something is spreading. But what it doesn't tell us is the so what and who cares. It doesn't tell us whether someone took any action. It doesn't tell us whether someone clicked on that tweet, clicked on a link in the tweet, read it, or anything like that. So impressions is something to be taken with a slight pinch of salt. As I say, it can show you how far it's spreading, because it's a potential number of people's feeds it appeared on. But as I'll go into more in a moment, engagement is a much more useful metric. So we had 868 tweets during the month by 458 participants. And there is a slight caveat to that, because as Lindsay and perhaps Andrew will know, during that time we had the launch of a video game, which also bizarrely had the hashtag Project Day. So
yes.
So I kept this in here because it shows us a really important picture. So a few accounts, one is Game One, another one is LV Pairs, or LOL as is another one. They had quite high impressions. So that means that tweets that they sent with Project Day appeared in lots of people's timelines. However, none of those people appear in the top 10 influential, and this is the column that's of most use to us as a metric, because Simpler uses an algorithm to calculate this, and so what they do is they look at the various accounts and how they're connecting with one another to look at the quality of the conversation and how they're linking with one another. So this goes to show how the highest number of impressions doesn't mean you were influential. So that ties up again to the super connectors. It's about the quality of the conversation you have and how you're connecting the system to itself. So impressions can also be gamified. So it's possible to get a bot to send out lots and lots of tweets with Project A or any hashtag. You can just send out tweet after tweet after tweet after tweet, and you can look as though you've got literally billions of impressions, which might look good on a chart. Wow, you know, billions and billions of impressions. But unless you're appearing on the top 10 influential column, you're having very little impact, besides potentially using the bot example, just annoying people with you know, lots of tweets that aren't saying anything in your timeline. So that's a really important metric to remember. I think it's about it really highlights it really clearly. I think that it's about the quality of your tweets and the authenticity of your tweets, and how you're connecting people up to one another in terms of sharing useful content and connecting the system to itself. And Andrew, I think you appear on there, prolific tweeters, so great stuff. So yeah, so the numbers aren't the whole picture, it's about the impact that you're having. And anybody can go on here and check you know, how they're doing. And of course, the caveat to that is it only picks up tweets with the relevant hashtag on. So if you're ever running a tweet chat or at a conference, the only way you can be counted is to include the hashtag on your tweets. So that's something to bear in mind. Next slide, please, Paul. And you'll have heard I talked about engagement, and there's a really easy way you can check that on your own Twitter account. So hopefully this isn't too small to see, but you click on your photo and then brings up another box. You click on analytics, you click on tweets, you click on the relevant month you want data for, and then you click your impressions data is a big graph in the middle. But as we talked about before, impressions can be gamified. You might have just sat pressing tweet, 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 which is, you know, great for impressions, but not so good for influence and impact. And engagement is a graph that will come up on the side. And engagement means anything from someone clicking on a link, retweeting or liking your tweet, or looking at your profile. The point is they've taken an action. So they'll have been interested in your tweet enough to, you know, take an action, not just scrolled on by. So engagement is a really good metric to look at. And I've just done a screenshot here of one of mine, just for information. A good engagement rate is usually considered to be over 2%. And my engagement rate here is 4.2%, so that's double. Nowhere near Rolf at work, and sadly, but for us more near human beings, 4.2% is really good. So what I've done here is Scriberia is also a good graphic company to share tweets with. They do brilliant sketch notes. So I shared a graphic by Scriberia about saying sorry. So I made the tweet relational by not only including the sketch note itself, the graphic, but explaining what the graphic says as well, and put my own spin on it as well. So made it relational to me, made it authentic to me, rather than just sharing something for the sake of sharing it. So that's your engagement rate. And it's also good to see, you know, what sort of things gets the most engagement. So you can do more of the same. Does that help? Any questions about that? And yes, it's via the computer. Yes, good point, Andrew. Yes, not the app. You need to be on a desktop computer to do that. And it's again being authentic. One thing I haven't included, but my biggest engagement rate tends to be, I go to parkrun most Saturdays, and I often post a picture of my sweaty face, and that tends to get the most engagement of all. And that is really just, you know, something I love doing, and is authentic. And you wouldn't ordinarily think a sweaty face would get lots of engagement, but again, it's just showing something I genuinely enjoy. It's how I felt about doing it and the fun I had. So, you know, it's about being authentic rather than trying to play a game or think what people might think they want to see. So, any more questions about engagement? Nope. Excellent. I think that's the end. If you wouldn't mind passing on to the next slide, please, Paul. So, oh, yes, of course, I had some audience participation things to do again. So in the chat box, I'd like you to think about your confidence level from earlier in the session. Has it changed? And what is one thing you've learned from this session that you will put into action? So you can just put that in the chat box over the next couple of minutes. And if there's any questions, I'm more than happy to take them as well. Thank you, Andrew, for joining us. As you see, we're just at 11 o'clock, so thank you for joining us.
Thanks. See you later.
Bye-bye.
Bye. Bye.
Awesome. So Andrew was saying that he's got increased confidence and knowledge, which is super, and his action is will be access simpler. Jane is saying her confidence level is also up, and looking at engagement is one thing she'll put into action. You're very welcome, Jane. That's great. And Zara is motivated to change her bio. And Lindsay was also saying that the rule of thumb about, if ever in doubt, don't. Because just remember, even if you delete a tweet, people can screenshot it, and it's something that you perhaps shouldn't have done. It can, stay there forever. So, again, please don't let the risk of things that can go wrong stop you getting involved in things, because the value is so much more. And iPad, confidence level is higher, have to use Twitter list to manage tweets. Of course, yes, there's so much more we couldn't have gone into, but Twitter list is a brilliant way to curate, because Twitter can be very noisy. Where on earth do you start? But yes, lists are a brilliant way of curating your feed as well. But thank you so much for joining. I hope you found that useful. I really enjoyed chatting with you all. So thank you ever so much, and go away and enjoy Twitter, and fully appreciate its value and potential. So thank you very much, and have a good rest of the day.
Thank you, Leigh. This was amazing masterclass, beautifully presented, and definitely food for thought. I'm going to go away and look at my bio, and start looking through. Was it gaping void? That's what I'm going to go look for now, for the sketch notes. But yeah, that was brilliant. We have recorded the session, and we'll circulate the slides. And yeah, just thank you so much. It's brilliant.
Thank you so much. Thank you to everybody who joined and for your brilliant questions. They're really good questions. And to the technical A team, Lindsay, Zara, and Paul. But thank you very much. Have a good rest of the day. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye-bye. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Bye-bye.